New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Ali.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Ali Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today, here on the Growing Edge. And I'd like to shout out to New Thought Media Network, our producers, for supporting this show, and to the Satya Center for sponsoring it. So if you're here for the first time, welcome. I know that you'll enjoy today's episode, and also you can find a whole archive of our past episodes on YouTube. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. And if you're here again because you enjoy these conversations, I also send you my love and appreciation for all of your support. As most of you know, we have conversations with individuals that are channeling their time, their talent, their energy, their love, their consciousness, their creativity into doing good work in the world. And today I have a very special guest, Tim Freke. Tim is someone that I was just talking to him before the show, and I was saying that there he is, that I'm a bit of a fangirl. I've definitely been so inspired by his work, by his teachings for so many years. And there's also some strange ways that our lives have interwoven and crossed paths. So we probably get into that. But before I go down that big rabbit hole, I want to read Tim's bio here. Hi, Tim, by the way.
Hello.
Tim is a philosopher and author of 35 books, translated into more than 15 languages, including the Jesus Mysteries, which was a top 10 Sunday Times bestseller, and Daily Telegraph number 39 book of the year. And that's in the UK, for those of you that are saying, I've never even heard of those. And for reasons he can't quite fathom, he was included in the 100 most spiritually influential people, living people, lists in Watkins Magazines for 21 and 22. His latest project is a groundbreaking cross between a book and a podcast called Why Your Life Really Matters, the Podbook, and that is available free on YouTube and on different platforms, your podcast providers. Tim has led life-transforming deep awake retreats globally for more than 3 decades. And this year, his retreat is in Glastonbury this October, and we'll get into that too. So welcome, Tim. I'm so glad that you're here and super excited to dive in a little bit deeper into not only your background, but how I came across your work and how our paths have crossed throughout the last decade or so. So, how are you?
Yeah, really well, Ali, and delighted to be here having a conversation.
Yeah,
And,
so
let's see where it goes.
all right. So where are you?
I'm in Glastonbury in England. If people don't know Glastonbury, it's very famous for its huge music festival, but that actually happens to be outside the town. The town itself is quite small, but it's always been a deep spiritual center. So it was the very first Christian community, had the biggest abbey in the whole of Europe before it was destroyed. And now it's a kind of quite a new age center, full of every sort of crystal shop and bookshops and all of that sort of thing. So it's a quirky little town, and but I'm local, so I've just grown up around here and ended up in the town.
Yeah, it is a funny, funky little town, and
Funny, funky town. That's about right. Yep, funny, funky town.
And I'm familiar with Glastonbury because my mother was born in Wells, which is just next door.
That's the sensible town next door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which has this glorious, massive, beautiful cathedral to balance out our kind of bit more pagan-y, kind of oddball hippie vibe, which is going on in Glastonbury. So that's the grown-up town that's just next door.
Yeah, no, it is they're both lovely towns.
They are both lovely. They
really are. And I don't know if you've ever been into the Market Square in Wells.
Many times.
Yeah, my mother she was an Olympic athlete, and she has her jump.
That's your mother.
That's my mother. Yeah.
That huge jump that's marked out. Oh my goodness. How extraordinary. Yeah, I've seen it many times.
Yeah, so my grandmother, Hilda, would on, days after the Olympics, she would sit there frequently and wait for tourists and people to come and admire the jump and then brag about her daughter. So
good for her. Isn't that a great story?
It is. Anyway, enough about that. So growing up in that part of the world, and knowing that you've authored 35 books and, been on this path studying philosophy for decades, and that's where your growing edge is still, in this deep awakening and philosophy and science. How did it all start? What was your first sort of glimmerings of being a bit more curious than the average child?
Do you know, Ali, I can't remember a time where I wasn't deeply curious. That seems to have just been there from the start. I can remember conversations with my father when I was very small, just always like, and fascinated by what is this? And I actually didn't grow up in Glastonbury. I grew up in a much more ordinary town a few miles away. And I would sit on this hill, which was quite near where I lived, which overlooked the town. And I was doing that one day. I was 12 years old, and I was watching all the grown-ups running around and consumed, as I often was, by the mystery of being alive and what the hell it is and what's going on and suffering and everything, death and all the things which you can think about. And something happened. Mm. And I think it was the first time for me that I had what I call a deep awake experience. I shifted. And the thing which was most remarkable at that time, and because it's my nature to communicate and to write, again, I don't know why, it just is, I wrote about it straight away. So I have records of it. Mm. And the biggest thing was the sense that the universe was full of love, and that I was completely embraced by this huge love. And I didn't have any context to understand it, but I had, when I was younger, gone to church with my mother. It was a Church of England, but a high church. I used to carry around the incense as a little boy, all dressed in white. And I had a love-hate relationship. Part of me just wanted to go and mess about and not do this rather serious thing. But other times I'd be transfixed by the sense of the numinous of being in the church and listening. And I'd stopped going by then, I think, when I was 12, but that was the only context I had. And I'd heard that God is love. My father had said it to me many times, even though he was an atheist, but he would still say that. And so that's the context. I went, oh, this must be God then. And wow, this is incredible. I need to know more about this. And that started all these decades later, still on the same thing. Like, how can I find that? How can I go deeper into the experience? How can I take others into the experience? And how can I understand, this is more recently, the last period of my life, how can I understand how that sublime spiritual experience fits with all of the other experiences of being alive, all of the banality, the suffering, and also what science has revealed to us about the nature of the universe. How does all that fit together? Because surely it must. And that's been an obsession.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. That has a lot of similarities to my childhood, having a always questioning, always wondering, what the heck is this? And it always appeared to me that the people around me, the adults, the kids, all of them, it didn't matter the age, that they all seemed to be completely bought in, sucked into this reality. And I thought it was like over the top, like, what the hell is this? And how can I get to be more like them? They seem to be way more relaxed but there was also this sense that I'm not like them, or I don't want to be like them, because life seems more mystical, more magical, more curious than what I'm seeing out there. And so me too, going on this quest for deeper understanding and wanting to know where I fit into this whole, reality. And so I think you mentioned sitting on a hillside or on top of a hill and looking out and having this profound experience. Mine was a little different. I went inside. I went into sort of a space that also felt very loving. It was almost like a respite from the crazy, strange, phenomenal outer world to this, I would maybe describe it today as, I don't know, we both have been aware of the word God has a lot of charge to it, but to use that word for a minute, it felt like God was giving me a little whisper. It's going to be all right. Everything's going to come together. It's going to be all right in the end. And then boom, I came back into my 5-year-old body. But that deep sense of comfort and unity and love that I felt back then when I was 5 kind of gave me the ability to make it through the ups and downs of life. And I can still draw upon that moment that sort of exists outside of, well, it exists now, but it also feels like it was in the past. But it's a touchstone, something to give me a remembering or an awakening to there's more going on than meets the eye.
Yeah, that's very young. 5 is very young.
Yeah, it was very young, but it didn't like wake me up and I was, an enlightened master after that.
No, neither for me either. But, quite the opposite.
Yeah, it probably gave me more of a challenge because it was so incongruent with what I was experiencing as a child, with my parents and kids at school, and that seemed to not be aware of this. That seems to not be as questioning or curious or discontent, I think is a big word for me. Moving through life with this, like, well, why don't we go deeper into reality with a capital R versus this sort of pseudo or this little reality?
That's a definite theme, I would say, as well, because, and I suspect it's true of most people who would be listening to this, at some point in everyone's life who becomes involved, it is kind of astonishing that we could be here having this experience, which is so utterly mysterious, on our way to death, which is so utterly mysterious, able to have this whole range of bittersweet experiences in a universe which is so utterly enormous we can't possibly conceive of it, and incredibly old, and think nothing of it. It's like,
right.
To me, I wake up every morning, it's like, what the hell is this I'm in? And it's important because you've got a life, and what are you going to do with it? because depending on what you think this is, well, that will govern what you do with your life. And
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of being around a lot of people who've been dying, and I see that. I worked with the dying for a little while in my life, and also friends and family, and I see that when that comes calling, suddenly it's like, yeah, whoa, what was this? And what did I do with it? And I feel very lucky that that was always there for me. It was always like, this is significant, Tim. Work out what it is. And if you see a better way of understanding, go for it, whatever the cost. And if you can deepen your experience, don't hold back and stay with what's comfortable, but go for the richer experience, go for the deeper understanding, take the risk, and then take the risk of giving anything you possibly can, because this is what we're in is extraordinary. And if we can see that, we can make it better and better.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the comments going on here, and I just see my daughter. My feelings are so mutual, always questioning, what is this life all about? Yeah, I think you're right. Many people that are probably watching this are, can relate to what we're talking about. But Tim, you've taken it to a whole new level. I mean, 35 books, for God's sakes. So
Too many.
yeah, and I love you and I, I'm also part of a group that you lead, and we have these deep conversations. And so I know a little bit about, not just what is published out there as far as books go and your Podbook. I also hear you talk in real time to people that are curious like us, that want to have a deeper understanding. But there's many of us that don't. And like you said, we've got this deep curiosity, many of us, but yet we have our everyday lives. We've got marriage and divorce and illness and parents, making their transitions and all sorts of things. So it's a real opportunity to sort of integrate these aspects. And
Yes.
That's what I want to get into here today.
Yes.
But before we get into that, because some people might have read your books that are watching today or might be listening later on, and so they will be aware of your own evolution, that you've not just been stuck in a story that started 35 years ago or however long ago, and you're still preaching that same thing. And you're not a preacher, I know that. But so how do you reconcile your own journey of awakening, consciousness evolution, or however you might term it?
So I'd say that, the thing about writing books is when you leave a record for yourself. And so I'd say that, I've just been exploring and experimenting right away from 13, and have done every damn thing I could possibly find, and found that you could come into these states in all sorts of ways. And that led me, when I was older, to write books on all of these different spiritual traditions. And I was very much seeing it from what gets known as the perennial philosophy, the idea that there's a commonality between all of these spiritual traditions. They're having similar experiences. They are also going, oh, look, there's this amazing love, there's this experience of oneness, there's some greater intelligence. These are commonalities. They're all different, but those are commonalities. So that I was very much going, oh, look, here it is again. Oh, look, here it is again. Oh, let's go over here. Taoism, here it is again. Hermeticism. And then I wrote 3 books on Gnostic Christianity, which were controversial. And one of them was the genuine, actual bestseller, which kind of catapulted my life in a whole new direction, because suddenly I was being driven around America in big cars to big presentations and TV stations and all sorts of stuff. So that was out of the blue, and like, okay, now we're doing this. And where that led me, Ali, was to go, okay, do you know what? I after the bestseller, I suddenly had the power to do what I wanted to do. And if I'd had my head screwed on right, I would have just kept on the same track and written more books about Jesus. And that's what my publisher wanted me to do. They very much went, yeah, no more books about Jesus. I've done with Jesus. I'm not doing Jesus anymore. And they weren't at all pleased. And they were right. They were right, because if I'd stuck with it, my life would have been different. But I chose not. I said, took the risk. No, that's not what I need to do. What I need to do for my own evolution is to work out, not to write about the past anymore, but to go, what I admire about all of these figures that I've written about is that they reinvented this perennial philosophy for their own time, because it didn't stay the same. What would it be for now? How can I write it down so clearly and so simply that people can get it as an experience as well as a philosophical understanding now? And it all led to this tiny little book called Lucid Living, which was so odd that no publisher would publish it until it was self-published by a friend, and then it really took off and it really did well, and now it's been published 3 times. And I'm hugely proud of it. It's a great little book, and it really does that. It really says the perennial philosophy really clearly. You can read it in an hour, and it's transformative. However, it's wrong. And I think what happened was that I said it for myself. I said it so clearly that at some point afterwards, I began to see what was wrong with it, and it began to unravel for me, which is why I've had to come out and go, look, I think the 34 books I've written, they're all good books. Some of them I think are very good books, and there's a lot in them of value. I don't want to dismiss them, but there is some spiritual assumptions that underlie them because of their foundation in history, which I now think needs major revision. And it's led me to create a whole new philosophy, a whole new way of approaching spirituality. And that's what I've written about in my last book, Soul Story, and then even more so in my Podbook, which you mentioned, Why Your Life Really Matters. And now my Unividuals podcast is exploring that. So I've had to come out and go, look, I was wrong, folks. And again, it was like, that's a huge risk. And it was. A lot of people were not at all pleased. But I feel like I'm so lucky, Ali, because what I wanted when I was 12 was to live a life where I could spend my time exploring this. And one way or another, I have. I've lived a life where I can explore this, and I'm still doing that. So why would I want to settle? And instead, I feel like, no, I've got something really beautiful here. It's new. I think it can take spirituality forward in a whole new way. And I feel so privileged to be able to develop it and share it. And that's where I've ended up. That's what I'm doing now.
Wonderful. I have a question before we go further. We talk about this deep need to know, this deep curiosity, this you said having the privilege of being able to do this work all the time. How does that interface with your personal life? Because I too feel like if I'm left to my own devices, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking into, personal development as well as spiritual awakening and helping others to do the same thing. And so how does that affect your personal life?
So I think when I was younger, not that much younger actually, because it's only been really shifted in the last 10 or 15 years. The spirituality that I was picking up, which was more traditional, really had a division between the spiritual and the mundane. And often the mundane was seen as in the way. When I was young, I nearly became a monk twice, because if you were an A-list spiritual seeker, you became a monk. But if you couldn't manage it, you became a householder. And not as good, but hey, do your best. and I grew up with all of that. And thank God, and I mean thank God, I didn't. And I had a family, because it was the most important spiritual event in my life by a long way. And what it led to, and which has really come out with this new philosophy, is going, look, it's the human experience. That is the spiritual path. So for me, there's no division now. And so it's more about seeing, I don't know, that I thought just the other night, I'd been working hard, and my wife Deborah and I, we just sat down and watched something daft on the TV or something in the evening. And I just thought, how precious is this, that I can sit down and be with the woman I love and watch something entertaining for an hour or two on the TV and then have a relaxing evening. I mean, that is just, and if I didn't have it, if I lost that, it would be such a loss. And so it's that appreciation that it's in our human lives. And part of what the new philosophy I'm exploring is very human-centered. So it isn't going as the old philosophy did. Hey, Ali, really, you're something else. You've got confused. You've fallen into the world and you've identified as Ali, but you're not really Ali. You're something supernatural. You're a soul, or you're a pure consciousness, or you're something else. You're a spark of God. Now, I think you can grow into all of those things, but I also want to go, but you're Ali. Yeah. And to really root it back in our humanity, so that rather than being something other, we are human beings that can evolve into these greater human beings. Well, my podcast that you met, it's called the Unividuals Podcast, because I've invented this name to describe a new aspiration on the spiritual path. So not the enlightened master who's disappeared off because they're enlightened and out of the illusion and left it all behind or seen through it. Not that, I don't think. I think that's just Indian religion. And as critical as I am of Western religion, I'm critical now of Eastern religion. It's all it is. It's Indian religion. It's got real value in it. I'm not dismissing it, but not that. Rather, the idea of an individual who's evolving into more, still an individual, but now a unividual, an individual conscious of unity, which is really a way of saying an individual who's really moving into that space that you touched when you were 5, I touched when I was 12, and who is growing into a new type of human. So I think I've lost you. I don't know.
No, she will be back. Hello, I'm Reverend Michael. I'm the producer. Tim, I mean, your body of work is just amazing. So, I mean, your bestseller was about Jesus. Was it considered, just taking a look at the titles, did you get a lot of pushback from the evangelical world on your viewpoint?
I did. I have distinct memories of touring the Bible Belt and, having a lot of disruption. But my feeling was that, I could always just go, hey, Jesus said, love your enemies. So let's give each other a hug and go from there. And and so we, and that was always very disarming, and we could find a way of making it through.
No, but again, I'm going to give you back to Ali here. We have connected back up the satellite. So let me give you back. Okay, hold on. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I dropped off due to something or other. So Michael was just talking about, how this is settled in with those people in your life that maybe have more of the old philosophy or mainstream religious views. And how has that been, as you talked about publishers not being so, happy with you moving away from the Jesus teachings and diving into that? How has that been in your life personally and in your professional world, as you've sort of moving beyond religious structures or thought? How is that?
I feel like, I don't know if it's the right analogy, but I feel like somebody who's been running a fair-sized company quite successfully and has suddenly left it and has got a startup. That's how it feels. It feels like, I was doing all of this, and then I went, do you know what? I'm going to go and do this startup. And it looks mad, except, when somebody does that in the tech world, it's because they really think, no, but this is the future. That's the past. Mm-hmm. And this may look small now, but this is where it's going to go. And that's what I think. I feel that. It's like, yeah, this is small right now. It's really small, but the future always starts small. But every now and then, a new way of understanding this arises and profoundly shifts culture. And I think unividualism, which is what I call it, I think it's that is the philosophy that can do that for the times we're in. So because I might be right, I have to give it my all. And that's what I've done. I've gone, right, okay, it's going to be a startup, and I'll draw the people to me who are wanting to be part of that startup and see what happens, and give it my best shot. And also because it's live, because it's new, you will know this, Ali, of course, from being at the online ICU group, which is exploring this, is I'm making this up as I'm going along. I don't mean I'm inventing it like on the hoof, but I mean that I'm working on it all day, every day, really, to try and refine it, to develop it. My feeling is, it's like if you're doing science, you test it. Well, you can't test philosophy, but what you can do is you can push it, which means you go, what's wrong with this? Where could this be wrong? And I spend a lot of time trying to work out what's wrong with it, what's wrong with it, what's wrong with it. And if I find something which was wrong with it, it's quite exciting because you can push it and then something new arises.
Yeah, we're going to take a short break, and I want to dive into that and something that we've talked about in the past, which is to do with what you're talking about, this startup company or this startup philosophy or whatever you want to call it. And that is this idea that as we move forward, there's some, and you had a very odd term for it, but philosophical afterbirth, I think you call it.
Yes.
So we'll be right back in just a minute, and we'll have more with Tim on everything that we're talking about. See you in a minute.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. Come expand your spiritual journey. Join us for Just the Talk, Sundays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Experience Unity Kitchener and Ottawa. Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Unity of Garden Park, New Thought Philadelphia, the Sunshine Cathedral, Unity of Savannah, and the Om Center for Spiritual Living. Come unleash your spiritual potential with New Thought Media Network.
mind. Open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life. On the growing edge, on the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
And we're back with Tim Freke. Welcome back, Tim. All right, so we were just talking about this idea of philosophical afterbirth.
We were.
When you mentioned that yesterday in our group, I thought, oh, that's a bit of a hard term to come to terms with. But I'm really interested in you sharing some of your ideas of how we still, our spiritual journey still has a lot of the I use the word shadows, but like lingering essence of religions and past teachers that you've written about the Tao, and you've written about Jesus, and so how do we sort of move into this new era of what you're calling unividualism, and how we evolve real time when there's so much of the past that sort of still clouds the language we use and our ideas about what God is, and what waking up is, and being on this very green growing edge of our own becoming. Like there's a little disconnect between what happened in the past religions or philosophies to what's actually happening now, especially, and I've heard you talk about this, with AI becoming something that we're so consumed with, that that's kind of woven its way into everything we know because of how much time we spend on screens. And so I know that was a lot, but do your best.
Well, okay, so let's start here. It's like if I say to folks who are listening to this, if you go back to ancient Rome or ancient Greece, let's go for Greece, and they thought there was the gods of Olympus, and they all argued with each other, and they all sat on a hill, and they could smite you, or they could help you, or, and you try your best to please them. But we've left all that behind. I think most people today would go, oh, that's all very interesting, but jolly good that we've left that behind. That wasn't it, was it? That's how things evolve. So we need to keep doing that. And that includes leaving behind things which have become established and mainstream now, which are also still very old. Spirituality is odd like that. If you needed brain surgery and someone came along and said, well, I believe in the ancients. So Plato said that the brain was really a cooling system for the blood. So I think, I should be the person that does your brain surgery. I think most people would go, you know what? I think I'm going to get a modern brain surgeon to do my brain surgery. And I'm not going to go down that road with you, because maybe Plato wasn't right about that. So my feeling is, look, the ancients were brilliant. I love them. I love all these figures. They paved the way for us, but everything evolves. That's the point. So we are standing on their shoulders. We know things they did not know. The biggest thing, one of them, and it's huge, that we know that they did not know, is that the universe is a process of evolution, that it's roughly 14 billion years old, although we may change the dates of those, but it's old, and that it's evolved from the simplest things you can imagine into this. One of the gags I love is just to go, look, and it's because it's true, is we now know that 14 billion years roughly ago, the universe was pretty much just hydrogen. It was just a gas. And that gas has evolved into Ali and Tim having a conversation about the nature of the universe. That is what we know. It's mind-blowing, but that is what we know. So they had no idea of any of this. So what we need is a post-scientific spirituality. Now, because science was born and became a reaction to dogmatic religion, which went, no, it's all in the book. It's all in the book. And they went, no, we got to study. We got to think new thoughts. And because people did that, we've now got the internet. We've been to the moon. We've got medicine. We're all living like kings compared to the people in the past. That's come because of doing that. But one of the prices that it was paid was that it dismissed everything that the old religion had been involved in as mumbo jumbo, supernatural nonsense. And that's obviously the world is full of people who are still in old religions, but the intellectual leading edge is now that scientific view. What I want to do is come in and go, you've thrown out the baby with the bathwater. All of the old stuff, that really was the bathwater. We do need to throw it out. But inside it, there is some really important things about the nature of spirituality, and that we can re-understand that in a post-scientific way. And what I'm suggesting, the essence of it is, everything is part of this one process of evolution. It's a process of becoming. It's happening in front of you. It's constant change. And through that constant change, new things keep arising. And that's got us from hydrogen to here, the physical universe, the biological universe, and then this other thing, which we're experiencing right now, which is the psyche. Psyche is just the Greek word for soul. We're experiencing the soul right now. It's a different level of reality. It's not material. You can see that for yourself right now. You're in it. It's where you dream. It's where you have spiritual experience. And that's what spirituality has always been about, understanding. So the very first episode, which was released yesterday, of my new podcast, the Individuals podcast, it's called Turning Spirituality the Right Way Up. Because what I want to say is, look, all of those old stuff, it's beautiful. It's just the wrong way up. It's not, we haven't fallen from something supernatural and we need to get back, which is essentially a very negative message. We are evolving this spiritual dimension. It's not where we've come from. It's the leading edge of this process of evolution. It's what we're evolving into, and we need to move forward. And then for the thing you started off with, which was the idea of philosophical afterbirth, which is just a bit of fun, really. But why I like it is because you can see throughout history, when something new arises, it's kind of covered with a lot of residue of the past. And you need to clean it off. And so the new spirituality which is arising, and evolutionary spirituality has been arising for some decades now. But even evolutionary spirituality in its current forms that I come across is still covered in philosophical afterbirth. It's still got loads of supernatural ideas. It's got a God at the beginning, some sort of consciousness or something. And what I'm saying is something much more radical. I'm saying we can understand the whole thing as everything, without everything that has any qualities whatsoever, is part of one process of forming or becoming, including everything we're experiencing in spirituality. And one of the big claims I'll end on this, but one of the big claims that I want to make is that incredible, vast, loving intelligence that I experienced at 12, you experienced at 5, and I'm sure many, many people listening to this, I think our ancestors experienced it. And although there's a time when they didn't, that's important. You go back more than 2,500 years, you do not find people talking about a loving God at all. The Greeks, they didn't have a loving God. But 2,500 years ago, maybe, it starts being talked about. Why? I think because it is evolving. Because it's not where we've come from. I think this vast, loving presence is the leading edge of 14 billion years of evolution. That's what we're evolving into. That's why it's so beautiful and so amazing. Now, completely understandably, when people in the past have experienced this without any knowledge of the evolving universe, they feel that big love, and then naturally they'll go, well, that's where we come from. That's the reality we've fallen from. I'm wanting to go, no, turn it the right way up. That is the most emergent level of the reality that's emerging. And we, in our human lives, get to contribute to it.
Phew. It's a lot. And I'm feeling right there with you. I think one of the common afterbirth thoughts or premises is that we somehow have our higher self or our true self. And we are seeking to like embody that higher self or true self. And I think your model is very close to my model. I mean, I would say we probably got some similarities, nearly identical, except you're doing a lot more thinking about it in this new, upside down way, or right side up way, I should say. How does one reconcile this idea of a higher self? When what I think you're saying is it's not a higher self with a small s, it's a higher self. Like when we
Yes.
pray, when we tap in, when we feel a sort of transcendence or a greater contentment with who we are, we're tapping into something greater. And I think in the past, those that are in some of my circles, we've labeled that our higher self, but it's really something a bit different than that.
Yeah, so I think all those experiences are really important, really valuable. I think that we're complex. The psyche or soul is a complex, and that there are more emergent, I want to say, that's the word I would choose, levels of ourself. So I know that, Tim can be functioning on this level and everything's like in bright colors, if you like, and Tim can be functioning on this level another day and everything's a bit black and white. But that's not because that's my true self and this is an illusion. It's just I'm a complex. And just like my body can be like, oh, or it can be like, yeah, so my soul can be like that too. And I want to nurture the more emergent levels where I'm, and that is, you could call that a higher self. It's a higher level of myself. And that is able to sense on the level of soul much more vividly. And everything goes better in those states. And then what we're tuning into then, I think, is a place where we can all meet as one. And when we do that, it's like plugging into a supercomputer. It's like there's a great mind, but it's not at the beginning. The great mind is made of lots of little minds. There's a super intelligence made of lots of lesser intelligences, and we are one of those intelligences. And we plug in, and then suddenly, oh wow, you can feel it, that you're touching something utterly sublime. And that's what used to be called God, and we can still use that word, but it's a very different version of what God is that we're talking about then.
Yeah, beautiful. So how do we move forward? How do we go about reconciling and these aspects, these levels of ourselves, maybe some call it like being an ego or the personality structure, and then there's moments of transcendence or emergence when we're not concerned. I feel like it's in the ego, it's very tight and you're very focused in on a particular thing, and then there's moments where you're way more broad and have a vaster perspective on things. What would be the new playbook, if you will, to how to get to this state and stay there? Or is that not the object? Is objective? Is it not like, oh, now we understand ourselves as individuals, that it's more of a living wide awake in the mundane? Or, because in the past, it seemed like people, monks, what have you, would go off to their caves and, be in one month. And now it's more of a lived, what we're attempting to do with our growing population, world population, is to live it while we're doing the mundane. Or it's not, like you said, it's a both and, it's not a one or the other. So what's the playbook now? And I know that you've got this new podcast, you've got the great Podbook on why your life really matters. So there's some guidance there for those that are interested in what you're talking about. But what would you say to those that are saying, I'm feeling you here, this feels right, this feels better than anything I've heard. How do I do it? Like, what do I do today when I got to pick up the kids from school? Or Cook dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I think about, personally, I mean, I know, you can call it the ego. There's definitely a state where you're very tight and all the rest of it. Personally, I avoid all of that now. I just think it's better if you go, look, I'm an individual and I need to evolve. And it's better for me and everyone else if I do. And that's what my life is. It's a process, because that's what everything is. Everything is this process of evolution. I'm part of it. I can evolve. And so my individuality is the foundation from which I do that. And that foundation is being a body which needs to sustenance and needs to interact with the world and has families and does all the things it does. And that foundation can then reach up to this communion with God. And that feeds back down to all the things. And suddenly the mundane starts to sparkle and be beautiful, because you're seeing it in this much more emergent way. Is that all the time? I don't think so. Certainly not for me. But can it be more and more? Yes. But also the whole process we're in, an evolutionary process, is not linear and it's not static. There's periods where, well, for me, I'm sure, in the creative process, but also just in my soul evolution, there's times where you just think, oh, I feel a bit like, what's going on? And always, I would say, a few days later, bang, something, and it's because my energy is looking somewhere else. It's gone deep inside. I'm unconscious of where, I don't know yet. It's in my soul, and then bang. So I don't worry about that. It's not like, oh, well, I'm not feeling it today. It's like, well, that's all right. And as you said, from when you were just 5, if you've had enough experience, it carries you through, because there's the memory of it, and you begin to, there's like your little finger touching it at least, and so there's enough. And then there's what you do. And so we've talked a little bit about the philosophy, how we see things, but a huge part of what I'm doing is also to develop practices, which I call psi sensing or soul sensing. So you're sensing with your psyche or with your soul. And I run these retreats. I've in Glastonbury. I've done them all over the world, actually, with thousands and thousands of people. And I call them now soul to soul, the soul to soul experience, because what I'll do is I'll just go, look, connect soul to soul, and you're sensing the other soul with your soul. And what happens is that you begin to come into a state of oneness with each other. It's a very direct way. And I do that, and it's not just with looking, but with lots of ways. And if it's something which is not separate from your life, because you're looking at people or listening to people all the time. So at any moment, you can be just like, oh, there's Ali, or while we're just chatting, damn it, I'm connecting with Ali's soul. I can't see it, but there it is looking back at me, for sure. And I can focus on it. And the more that I focus on it, the more, it starts to change. And we've actually quite recently released a film. I really recommend it it's only 2 minutes long. It's called The Soul to Soul Experience. It's on YouTube. It's beautiful. And you see people doing this. And at that moment, you just come into a different state. And that's where the top of your head comes off, as it were. There's an enormous love. I mean, the love is just like you're wading through it. And it feels so safe and so natural. And that's something which you can experience as a big experience, like at a retreat. But also it's something you can take out into your life and start to do. You don't have to know, people don't have to know you're doing it, but you're doing it. And it's lovely. You go to a shop and you just, for a second, you connect soul to soul with the person who's serving you, and they feel it. They do. For a moment, they just, oh, he saw me. He actually, and we all know what that feels like when someone sees you. That's why my group is called the ICU. Because we see each other. It's also short for the International Community of Unividuals. So it's a bit of a fun, but it is also, I see you. I see you. So the thing about the unividual aspiration is somebody who can see others, who is seeing what life is seeing what existence is, and therefore contributing something really valuable to our collective evolution.
Yeah. As I've experienced your psi sensing in the groups that I'm a part of, and this isn't new to me. I mean, for many years, it's been a sort of a practice in groups to stare at each other and, connect left eye to left eye and have a deeper sense of communion. And as you bring it out into the experience of everyday life, like going into the shop and engaging with the people that you cross paths with or at work, or I'm thinking of how it used to be where, maybe this is some of the afterbirth, thoughts I'm having here, that people used to not engage in that deep union other than going to a church or going to some kind of, I don't know, group or something. And now what I'm imagining, which I know imagination is a huge part of what you're talking about, I'm imagining it being part of everyday life for those of us that are aware or awakened to this idea of being able to connect with the mystery or God in just simply being out in the world and paying closer attention to God, not the old God that lives in the church or, something, he's got an earpiece in the church listening to you when you go in or something, to now we're finding that connection with source. I don't know if that's a word that's still relevant. We're connecting with source energy out at the shops or with the tree or playing at the playground with your grandchildren, or like it's not just confined to a church or a mosque or a temple or
Yes.
in the Himalayas or some other place where you have to go and find it. It's right
Yes.
here.
Yes, this is part of the big shift that's happening. I think, just in passing, I do think source is afterbirth. I think it's a leftover.
Okay.
It's the idea that it's come from this great source. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't think it has. I think it's moving to that. I think the source is the simplest thing you can imagine. And you get that in sort of Buddhism and Taoism, like the idea that the Tao, which is empty, it arises as just what? Yin and yang, two-ness, relationship, something very simple, nothing grand, very, very, very basic. And then from that comes everything. And then ultimately comes this communion of souls, this super soul, which we can be conscious of, that we experience as God. And I think you're right. I think we can okay, look, this is what I think is happening actually, Ali, and I don't want to sound naive or like,
okay, wait, we are right at the end, and I want to, this will be your piece that you're leaving with our group. So
okay,
go for it, Tim.
Good. I think throughout the whole of history, human beings have evolved and changed far more than people realize, and that we are quite different in so many ways to people 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. And the people of the future will be different again. They will, without any doubt. And what I want to predict is they will be univigils, that we will be moving collectively into a state where we're starting to live in a whole different way, because we're coming, more and more of us are coming into this higher communion, and it will change what it means to be human once more, just as it has in the past. It will take us into a whole new world.
Beautiful. Tim, thank you so much. I could go on and on. Maybe you'll come back in the future and we can dive a bit more deeply into some of these concepts and unividualism. So thank you, Tim. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. I know that this is a deep conversation and it will continue. And I'd love to hear back from you, and I'll pass on any questions you might have for Tim onto him. And I will see you next Monday. Goodbye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing